So this is a bit of a From the Vault episode, because I had this finished when the Netflix Death Note movie came out about 6 months ago. I gave it to an editor, kind of forgot about it, and just got it back pretty recently. The quality doesn't exactly hold up to my current videos, however, I think the main points I make are still really good, so really want to still share it with you guys. Hope you enjoy. Something always bugged me about Light's awesome strategy where he forgot his memories and reclaimed them many episodes later to completely destroy any suspicion upon him. This was, in my opinion, the high point of Light's strategic maneuvers throughout, because until this point, he's done many things to avoid detection, but he's also made some obvious fucking blunders, kinda leading L right to him. But that's a topic for another video. I don't entirely blame him for getting drunk off his power, realizing the extent of his new weapon's undetectable abilities, but this memory strategy, as I like to call it, tapped into the depths of the power of his weapon with an ingeniously original maneuver to completely annul anything L could think of, being that he obviously can't put his finger on the limits of a supernatural weapon, but while that's all said and done, there's still something very off. It's only when I sat down to write the script for a sarcastic trailer on Death Note did I pick it up and switch the topic to this video, because thanks to this one point, everything that's bothered me in the series kinda comes together, and it casts Light in an entirely different light, no pun intended, so I would like to share it here. But first, some background is required. And no, I'm not just like mid-vid clickbaiting, that serves me no purpose. Just listen. In short, one of the main principles of Death Note that I and so many others adore is, aside from the epic strategies making up the possibly greatest cat and mouse mind game in anime, another equally important point, at least to me, was the question, what is justice and how can we define it? At first glance, here's the situation. We have L operating in the conventional manner, where if someone does a bad deed, they should get punished, after being tried and found guilty with a fair punishment to fit the crime. While Light Yagami seems to have a different take on the whole justice approach, that it's worth killing in a much wider spread fashion for a purpose much more than punishing the individual criminal, because this can also act as a deterrent for many future crimes. The result would be many petty criminals or even innocents that were wrongly convicted, being an insanely high percentage of inmates, get purged for the sake of the greater good. Furthermore, if Light's divine justice is categorized as a deterrent for the greater good, killing the police that chased him would be equally justified to killing unavoidable false accusations, because from that perspective, the law enforcement is withholding justice. The scariest part is, it's a method that works. And in a previous video, I've calculated percentage-wise how many people he saved, and Film Theory made an entire video on the matter, but frankly, I'll link mine at the end because, honestly, they don't really need my promotion. In any case, being that the crime rate dropped 70%, he's by default saved millions and millions of people, and that's a solid argument to stand in his convictions. That's where the memory strategy falls into place, to bring everything together as far as what Death Note is trying to tell you, as far as what Light's destructive justice really means. The strategy entailed him losing his memories, so that by default, he'd unknowingly end up joining forces with L and assist him in the capture of Kira. And being that Light is adding a huge role to the capture of this Kira would result in more than a perfect alibi. But here's where the situation gets sticky, and proves the perversion of Light and his power. When Light's memories vanish, he joins L to capture Kira, while having no knowledge of the Death Note. In other words, had Light been a bystander to the entire Kira situation, he'd have fought for L's justice, and he'd have been on L's side, because while his memories were wiped, he didn't even have second thoughts about shutting down Kira, who was clearly on the unjust side of the scale. However, when he reclaimed the Death Note and his memories came flooding back, so did the development of his character for the first 10 episodes of the series, and throughout all the series of events he caused using his Death Note. And despite now tasting both sides of the justice scale, Light was resolute in his version of justice once again. But what am I getting to with all this? Why can't we just think of this all as a good strategy on his part and move on? Well, firstly and most importantly, I want to point out that as far as Light's character writing, Death Note's creator did a spot-on amazing job, because this back and forth that Light went through was by no means a mistake in character writing, that he just had a weak resolve. In the beginning of the series, Light had his mind on how the world is rotten, and to be completely honest, I'm sure every one of you have thought that at one time or another, despite never having the inkling that what Light did should actually happen. Yes, Light's a clever kid, but legitimately, he's no different than anyone else, being that his scale is off and easily influenced depending on his position and depending on his ego. That's one detail revealed in his memory strategy shed the entire show for me in a very different light, because I believe Death Note is trying to tell a different story in addition to what people seem to think it's saying. Superficially, we have a story of a mind game between a detective and a killer. A little deeper, and you have an entirely different battle, a debate as to what justice entails. And finally, merely because of the lack of conviction Light had in his version of justice, and the fact that he's just resolute in his ideals for the power, tells a new story entirely. Him wholeheartedly joining L's Cell's team during that memory loss episode tells a story of the corruption of power at its finest. Because, for the most part, when a work of fiction talks about this subject, 1, he ends up painted as a black-hearted villain to clearly show his corrupt nature, and 2, he's beaten. He's never revealed to be on the victorious side, so his ideals are never flushed out to their entirety, and what the result of these ideals would be. Now take a good look at Light Yagami. Death Note isn't trying to make you decide which justice is the better justice. It's stating to you, here are 2 versions of justice, and here's the final result of both. People don't include what Light's justice actually did to Light as a person when they're pondering that side of the equation. I hear the argument constantly on all sorts of forums and comment sections that Light's version of justice is correct. He just went out of control and developed a god complex with a disregard for human life, and that's where he went awry. Now, I believe Death Note is telling you just the opposite. It's not Light's specific nature that gave him this god complex. Now that he has the power, it's his method of justice and power that gave him the god complex. Once it's dubbed as okay to have tens of thousands of innocents die by your hand, for the greater good, the fine line between good and evil, as well as the regard for human life in general, ceases to be. I believe that's the main purpose of the second half of Death Note as well, despite many people not remembering it fondly. One reason for that is because Nier and Mello are nowhere nearly as badass as L. And 2, Light was being a total dumb fuck, not even able to maintain the position that he already developed for himself. Oh, and there's that third option too. Light didn't screw up at all. He was still awesome. It was just Mikami and the others that worked with him that led Light's enemy right to him. But that's exactly my point as well. And all 3 of those complaints are the same complaint. Once Light's looking down on humanity to such an extent that sacrifices aren't even worth wiping sweat off his brow for, then the mere humans he uses are looked at as more tools and machines than people. Not as beings with free will, and not as beings crucial to the world if they ever are any form of hindrance to him. And I know this may be a little bit of a stretch, but Light's mindset on killing people that could be regressive to society, or at least the society he envisions, will ultimately lead to Light being willing to kill people for merely unproductivity, even putting NEETs in a hard situation, because his goals for humanity have evolved throughout the series to something entirely different. This is revealed by the Misa development throughout the story as well. In the first half, Misa originally showed up as an annoyance for him, that he kept continually brushing off and managing to manipulate her feelings to an extent where he can use her and those that cared for her to his ultimate advantage, where he would use humanity's biggest weakness to his greatest strength, being human emotion, whereas in the second half, Misa remained an empty shell. Not only did she never acquire a place in his heart that he can actually come to love her, but on the contrary, the entire second half, she acted purely as a tool, without any emotional manipulation even required for their love story to progress. Her being the physical representation of how he regarded humanity and how humanity's value deteriorated in his eyes over the 6 years he played God. So to slightly reiterate, this is the tale of how Light's justice, that in theory would technically work despite a horrible cost, but how in reality it would end up. Light did defeat L, his ultimate rival, representing how, in the short term, it's possible to get ahead of the game by sacrificing human values and morals, but would result in an eventual defeat due to screw-ups on his side, especially Mikami's. That fits to this point, because the only reason why Mikami was really a hindrance to Light was because he was not autonomous like Light started to view humans to be, and that he was defeated by a team, by Nier and Mello, despite some slightly not-so-awesome writing as far as the superficial story. This reveals to Light and everyone watching how humanity admits to their flaws, and that not everything can be done alone. And that's the only real way to proceed, by accepting your human mistakes and your human weaknesses. I really do believe this is the representation of the Nier-Mello duo, despite its rather lackluster representation in the anime. So with all this being said, Light's position throughout the anime starts off as an interesting character that can be easily understood by the audience, that may actually have something going for him as far as what he's saying, and the eventual plummet of this great character into darkness due to power and ego. This is a doubly interesting tale, because I believe without a doubt that Light represents everyone in a sense. Money and stature in this world equal power, and everyone wants these things to almost no exception. Many of them have righteous reasonings, and many more unfortunately believe their reasonings to be righteous to explain what they covet. But more often than not, when someone makes it to that position of wealth, fame, and power, there's a saddeningly small number that are unaffected by their new status at all, and retain their so-called righteousness. While the vast majority, unfortunately, despite possibly deluding themselves into the fact that they have righteous intentions, have fallen to the point where money has begun to to trump humanity. Statistically, you see this plainly, as the divorce rate, for example, for the extreme upper class in America is insanely high, even as a comparison to middle class. And another alarming statistic being the percent of children growing up in a household of this sort to end up in prison on drugs or with zero connection to their family, due mostly to greed and ego, when possessions become worth more than people, making people nothing more than possessions. So it's not that Light's method wasn't flawed, but Light was, and that was due to his depression into darkness that caused his defeat. But that's not accurate either, because Light's method was flawed, because that method causes this depression into darkness and causes the ultimate eventual failure. Don't get me wrong, I'm not stating my opinions as far as correct and incorrect. This is just the message I think the creator of Death Note is trying to relate to his audience, albeit obviously on a much more mundane level than committing mass murder. He's trying to say that power can corrupt anyone, so be careful, folks. Thanks for watching, fanbase. I hope you enjoyed. I'm kinda happy in a way that this was late, because it's a good time to ask you if you want more anime decoded videos. If you do, awesome! Let me know the subject in the comments. Also, feel free to like and subscribe if you did enjoy, and check out some of my more recent videos, because yeah, the quality has really improved over the last 6 months. It's scary. I've been trying for 3 vids a week now, and it's been tough, and I hope to begin devoting more time to it once I hit 100k subs, which is really close, thankfully. So sorry for relying on a possibly dated upload. I've just been killing myself working on this recently, aside from schooling and part-time stuff. Thanks for your support, guys. Stay weird, fam.